So, 20 minutes past 8. As we saw from Carol earlier on, some dramatic weather today. Beautiful scenery. We're going to take you now to Dorset's Jurassic Coast. Now, not only have we got beautiful sunshine, it's a beautiful morning there. Absolutely, look at that. But if in the centre of your screen there, you will see a major landfall as the cliff has crumbled down. And it's caused a real impact on a coastline. A lot of people will know that coastline, but you can see the scale of that cliff fall.
4,000 tonnes of rock. That's how much has tumbled down the side there. And it's the biggest landslip in 60 years. And John Maguire is there for us. I mean, it looks absolutely stunning, but it must just look like such a devastating scene as well, John. Morning.
Yeah, morning, Naga, morning, Charlie. I suppose the thing is that there's a juxtaposition between what you see just behind me. Look how tranquil, look how quiet, look how calm the water is, the sea. And then you come around here, and that really is a very, very dramatic scene, isn't it? We're not sure quite how high the cliff is here, at least 400-500 feet high, because Golden Cap, the highest point on the south coast, is just behind us, is just to the west of us. But look at the trees. So some of those trees would have been, I don't know, something like 50, 60, 80 feet high or something like that. They've come down. And although it looks like mud, what you can also see in amongst it are very, very large boulders. So luckily this happened overnight on Monday night. Nobody was on the beach, but it's a dramatic scene. Sam Scriven, good morning to you, Sam, from the Jurassic Trust here. What do you make of it?
It's amazing. I mean, these kinds of things don't happen very often, and it's incredible to be able to come down here and see this, like nature in action. But as you say, great news that it happened overnight as well.
Unpack the science for us. What's caused it, do we think?
Well, if you look at the cliffs, we've got a layer of clay at the base here, this grey rock behind us.
That's the grey, right.
And on top of that, you've got a lot of porous sandstone. And that's soaked up rain over the winter months while it's been the wet weather and got very heavy. The clay surface underneath it has become very slippery, and the whole thing is destabilised as the cliff has begun to dry out in the spring. And for whatever reason, it's just all gone into the sea.
We think this hasn't happened at this spot anyway for about 60 years or so, but they are frequent, aren't they? Various landslides of various different sizes.
Yeah, it's all part and parcel of this amazing World Heritage Site. It's a naturally evolving coastline, and this is how it likes to evolve. Often, of course, it's just the very slow wearing away of the cliffs, but every so often it does something incredibly dramatic.
We think we're at a safe distance,
yes.
but can you predict this type of thing?
No. I mean, in a sense, it's inevitable. On a coast that is evolving naturally like this, you're always going to get landslides and rockfalls and things like that. But quite when they're going to happen is very hard to predict. There may have been little warning signs for this one. At the top of the cliff, there may have been little cracks that started to open up, but that may have been in the few days beforehand or maybe a week beforehand. But even so, if you see them, you can never tell exactly when it's going to go.
Yeah, you've always got to be on your guard, haven't you? It's National Trust land. I know they've closed the footpath at the top of the cliff, unsurprisingly. Of course, this is famous for fossil hunters, this stretch of coastline. That's why it's the Jurassic Coast. We had the Mary Anning film just released a few weeks ago. I mean, would there be fossils in there? I mean, we're telling people not to venture into it, presumably.
That's right. Well, all of these rocks around us formed at the bottom of the sea at the beginning of the Jurassic period, so between 200 and 170 million years ago. And that time this was a thriving ecosystem. So most of the rocks around here do contain some kinds of fossils. So is there something in here? It's likely, but as you say, at the moment it is still a very, very dangerous place to be. The countryside rangers working with the landowner, they have cordoned off the dangerous area of the cliff edge up there, about 250 metres. There's some there still expecting to fall down yet, actually. But the coast path is still open, so they just were able to move the path, which is a good thing. So people can still enjoy the path. They can obviously still come down to the beach here and enjoy it, but the basic information is just to stay clear of this for the time being.
All right, Sam Scriven, thank you very much indeed from the Jurassic Heritage Trust. Very good advice, but absolutely fascinating as a geologist to hear Sam's theories about what's happened here. And we were talking just earlier, this hasn't happened maybe on this spot for about 60 years or so, but in geological terms, that is just a drop in the ocean, isn't it, when we're talking about, what, millions of years of evolution. It'll be really interesting to see how the natural environment deals with this landslip and what happens to this beach from now on.
John, it's really interesting. I'm thinking that a lot of people like you we'll go walkabout, you know, on the beach, and I can only imagine you're probably looking up at the cliff that is intact, where you are, and thinking, well, as your expert just said, you don't know when there's going to be a fall.
No, well, exactly. And different parts of the structure of the coast will behave in different ways. So further down towards West Bay, where the geological structure is different, you'll get more of a collapse. This is obviously a slide or a slip, but obviously very dangerous. Keep your distance. And in fact, we made a risk assessment here and thought, right, well, this is a safe place to be. But yes, you're quite right. And as we walked up the shingle to arrive here this morning, the echo as well from the cliff face was creating a strange noise. Gary and the cameraman and I kept stopping. I was thinking, what was that? What was that? So you've got to be on your guard.
Well, look, it's really interesting, John. And above all, those images from your drone way above it, it's just it reminds us the dangers of nature, but also the beauty of nature today. It's spectacular scenery. John, thank you very much.
Makes it all the better when you're seeing, I know it's dangerous, obviously don't go there. As John said, the health and safety assessment has been done, but when the sun's shining, it just makes everything look
absolutely stunning.
Better. Now, Morning Live takes over from us, of course, but we want to leave you before then with some rather gorgeous images from Dorset's Jurassic coast. What you're seeing just in the middle of your screen in the top is a huge landslide. It's left a trail of debris on the beach, but still, look at that view. Just beautiful. Have a lovely day.
The time's 9:25. A major landslide has sent 4,000 tonnes of rock tumbling onto a beach on Dorset's Jurassic coast. It's the biggest landslip to happen there in 60 years. And as you can see from these images, the incident has dramatically changed the coast's landscape. Our correspondent John Maguire is in Bridport where the landslide happened. Morning, John. So what were the conditions that caused this huge landslip?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a second, Anita, with an expert. It's a combination of wet, dry, geology, coastal erosion, all sorts of different factors, but we'll unpack the science for you in just a second. I just wanted to show you this, really. Since we've been here this morning, obviously the currents and the tides have brought this silt across, which is still material that's coming down from the landslide. And although we are shooting into the sun here, so it's a bit tricky, and of course we're keeping a safe distance, that gives you an idea of just how much material has come down. It looks like mud to the naked eye, but when you look very closely, there are huge boulders in amongst it, and out into the water you can also see trees and bushes and some of the vegetation that would have come down from a certain part of the cliff as well. We think the cliffs here are probably around 500 feet high, so a spectacular sight to say the least. Sam Scriven, good morning to you from the Jurassic Heritage Trust, a geologist. Anita was asking what's caused this, essentially, the science behind it. What do we think's happened?
Well, it's a completely natural event, of course, so in one sense it's just the cliffs doing their thing. But the particulars here is all down to the arrangement of the geology we've got. So at the base you've got this grey clay, and on top of that you've got some beds of quite porous sandstone which have soaked up a lot of water over the wet winter months. And in fact you can see it just dribbling out across the top of that grey clay down the cliff face. These wet patches are where the water is literally flowing out from inside the cliff out onto the cliff face. So of course you've got this heavy wet sandstone on top, and then as it starts to dry out, its properties start to change, it weakens and it collapses. But why here? Why this particular spot? Nobody knows, and these things are always completely unpredictable.
And they do happen quite often, although this is a very large one and it's spectacular to us to see. This stretch of coastline, these events happen fairly regularly, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best things about the World Heritage Site here is that it's a largely natural coastline which is allowed to evolve on its own with natural processes, and this is it. This is the coast doing its thing. I mean, some people will look at this and think that it's damaging the coast in some way, and of course it's a hazard for people, but this in a sense is the coast being created. This is how this beautiful environment forms.
Of course, no one's going to come and clear this away, but will a natural element return that stretch of the beach that's now covered to shingle as we have here?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think what's likely to have happened is that's going to have brought down a whole load of very big boulders with it. But as you said earlier, a lot of it's very loose mud and sand and clay, which will be slowly stripped away naturally by the sea and the rain. So if you came back here after the winter, for example, a lot of that would probably be gone. But what's left, maybe a big, what's called a boulder arc. And so that might be there for hundreds of years yet. So we may never get back to this shingle beach in that spot again.
And we know the National Trust that owns the land here in the cliff tops have closed the coastal footpath that runs across the edge of the cliff. So clearly, people should respect nature, respect what's happening here, and keep their distance.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the footpath has been diverted, I should say. So
yeah.
the countryside rangers here in Dorset have been working with the National Trust on that. But yes, they've cordoned off 250 metres of cliff top. And within that cordon, they're still expecting some of the cliff edge to collapse. So it is an active event, not only here on the beach in front of us with the silt and the mud being washed away, and you can imagine how treacherous it would be if you tried to cross that there, but the cliff edge too is dangerous. So the basic message is yes, definitely. You can observe it from a safe distance, but best to stay away. To be honest, the drone footage and the spectacular photographs that have been taken from the air by people is the best way to look at this thing.
You won't get a better view than that. Sam Scriven, thank you very much indeed from the Jurassic Heritage Trust. I don't know whether you'll be able to see this, Anita. It might be a little bit tricky just to pick out, as I say, especially shooting into the sun. But there are, where the top of that lower grey cliff is, there are sheep there. Sheep obviously were grazing.
We can see them, John. Yes, we can see them.
They didn't come down with a landslide. Yeah, look at them.
I think
but
they're
Sam was telling me that the local sheep here on this...
They're pretty sure-footed, aren't they, John? They
yeah,
can probably
hardy.
cope with a lot of stuff. Really dramatic, though, and really curious to see the trees and the plants in the water. John, thank you very much for bringing us up to date with what's been happening there. John Maguire in Bridport.